Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Building a Better Future, Stories from Climate Tech Founders. Over the course of the last 7 weeks, we've been chatting to founders who are still in those exciting but still challenging early years of their startup life. We've been exploring with them where their love for sustainability began. We've been hearing their journeys to founding their company and exploring what challenges they've faced in those first few years as a founder. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Cherry. I'm the owner of Above and Beyond Recruitment. Our business partners with climate tech startups, and we help them to develop their employer brand, tell their stories, and grow and scale their product and engineering teams. If this is your first time listening to the Building a Better Future series, then please do go and check out our previous episodes. The video recordings are all on my LinkedIn page, and also they're all on our Above and Beyond YouTube page as well, the link to which you'll be able to find in the comments. We also have a podcast version available, which is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Acast. So go and check it out there. Today, we are joined by Eddie Fitzgerald-Barron, co-founder of C3. Launched back in 2019, C3 is a tech-driven consultancy which works with small businesses, helping them to understand and reduce their carbon emissions. Eddie has a background in international business and multidisciplinary innovation, which I think is a fantastically titled degree, and I absolutely can't wait to hear more about that. He also worked as a social media risk consultant before launching his own business. So Eddie, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Cherry. It's really nice to be here, and thanks so much for having me on.
My pleasure. So I always start these interviews, as long-term listeners will know by now, by going back to the beginning and trying to understand where that spark in you first came from, either to run your own business and to kind of go down the path of entrepreneurship, or that spark for the passion for sustainability and fighting climate change. I assume, having done a degree in international business management and innovation, you were probably somebody who always had a bit of an interest in how business worked and an eye for innovation. But yeah, where do you think that came from?
Yeah, it's good. It's always good to start from the beginning, isn't it, with these types of things? So yeah, it's good. So in terms of where it really came from, the first kind of realization I had a taste for entrepreneurship was when I was about 17, 18, in the summers in between, before uni and after, and in between university years. I would come back and was struggling to find a job that was sort of well paid, or that was kind of an amount that I was happy with. So me and a friend started a gardening business, and we basically just did odd jobs for people. We're called the dab hand gardeners, and we were booked up for months and months in advance for the whole of for 3 summers in a row. So it was a really nice kind of introduction to it. So that was the first time I really started a business of some sort, although it wasn't like an official business. It was a very much sort of a little summer job. But yeah, no, always been interested in that type of thing. Always wanted to start my own thing. In terms of sustainability, that was a bit of a different one. That was a much more recent realization, probably in the last 2 or 3 years since starting C3, actually. So originally, I'd say that I wasn't the most sustainable or passionate about sustainability as potentially other people in the industry. But what I found was that once you start to research this space and start to understand the situation that we're in, that passion just comes naturally. It's something that you realize, and you're like, hang on a minute, we're in a bit of trouble here. We need to do something to sort this out. And that's really where the passion for sustainability came. It was actually just from researching and getting ready to launch C3, just because of I think it's difficult to put into words, and it's why a lot of sort of activists and people go down that alarmist, quite alarmist, because it is alarming, the situation we're in. So as soon as you start researching those types of things, that's really where the drive for sustainability came from.
Do you know, I had a lady called Louise from Blue Methane on the show a few weeks ago, and she said a similar thing. She said once she had gone and studied and researched and understood what the problem was, she couldn't unknow it. You know, the genie was out of the bottle, and then you have to do something. Once you know, you can't then not address it. So yeah, great. Okay, perfect. And so talk me through the degree you did then. So you chose to go and study business. What did you cover throughout that course, and how do you think that, and then the masters you went on to, has kind of helped you on your business journey since?
Yeah, absolutely. So degree-wise, started off with an undergraduate in international business management with French, and that for me, it was a fantastic course. It was a really good introduction to it. but it was relatively basic in terms of things that we were learning. It wasn't that useful in terms of the actual material content
How's
that we
your
were
French
learning.
now?
French is pretty good. So I spent a couple of years. Yeah. French is pretty good. I spent a couple of years living in France in between uni. I did a double diplôme, which is like a double degree year abroad. So I sort of like studied business in French in France for a year, and got a second degree from that, which was great. And then so that was undergraduate degree. It was, like I said, it was good. It was a nice introduction to business. It was good to get the basics done, but it was all very sort of textbook, sort of strategic thinking, financial decisions, all these types of things, which I'll be completely honest with you, although they're really important, aren't the sort of basis for, especially for how we've gone with C3. It's a lot of it's just about learning on the job and getting going with it. The difference about the masters was really where I learned everything. I feel like I learned more in a year than I did in the previous 4 years of my undergraduate degree. It was actually a little bit longer than multidisciplinary innovation was the kind of condensed format. It used to be called multidisciplinary design-led innovation, which was a bit too much of a mouthful, so they changed it to MDI for short. And basically the concept of the whole course was about getting other brilliant minds, like lots of different people from different backgrounds together working on complex business issues, so real world problems. We didn't do much kind of reading of textbooks or sort of going through course material or going through different modules and all that kind of stuff. We literally just got given sort of consultancy projects. So we did a couple of really interesting one with Santander Universities, one with the National Trust, one with Northumbrian Water, and they would just come. The people from the actual business would come into the university, give us all of this sort of this problem, give us a brief, and we'd then go away and work on it for 3 weeks and come back with a full sort of solution, as it were. And it was real kind of like, no idea was a bad idea. We'd just come up with any idea we wanted to. There was a lot of whiteboards, a lot of kind of chucking ideas up at the wall and seeing what sticks. That for me was the most sort of the most progressive part of my learning, my kind of education, because I wasn't learning from the teachers. I was learning from other people that had done design courses, that had done other areas of business, and it meant that we were it was like peer-to-peer learning. So we were all learning from each other, and also just learning by working it out. So I didn't, before that, I'd never used any kind of Adobe tools or anything like that. But by the end of the year, I could use different Adobe tools just because other people were teaching me how to do it, and I kind of had to do it to build different things. So I can't express how important I think self-learning is, and teaching yourself how to do things and kind of learning on the job, as it were, rather than just learning from textbooks and modules and professors, and which have their time and place. I'm not saying it's the worst, but that's where it really, my kind of education came from, I guess.
That's amazing. And sounds like it might be fairly unique then to have had that much applied commercial real world experience throughout the course of a master's. Yeah,
it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. It was like a whole year. I think we must have done sort of 10 or 15 projects across the whole year. And I think a lot of other people on that course had gone on to open their own consultancies, more in design thinking and innovation rather than specifically in carbon footprint calculations. But it was very sort of it was an amazing course. It's an amazing university as well. Northumbria University is really, really fantastic in terms of giving those opportunities, and the whole thing I thought was brilliant. Like you said, it was a lot of experience without actually working within a company, and still getting that experience.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Do you think there were any kind of core lessons that you learned from that time, or any kind of experiences that you had that have really, informed the decisions you've made with C3 over the last few years, I think?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure about anything specific in terms of that is one thing, but in general, just the ability to Google things, the ability to learn, the amount of YouTube videos there are showing you how to do something is amazing. Like if we literally think about it directly into what C3 does now, everything that we've learned, everything that we do has come from Googling it or researching it in terms of, like, I'd never done any coding in my life before C3. And then by 3 months later from when we sort of started working on it, I built the front end to our first website, which it looked awful, don't get me wrong, it was terrible, but it was, I'd never done a single piece of coding, but somehow through Googling and researching and watching YouTube videos, I was able to build a front end of a website. It's amazing what we have at our fingertips. So I think that for me is the biggest learning, is just that, and I was even speaking to my partner the other day about how even in her work, she's like an accountant, and even in her work she's often Googling stuff, or she was asked by someone in our team, where do I find this information, what are the sort of rates of this, what are the VAT rates of this type of thing. She was like, just Google it, like you can just find out these things, like you don't need to ask me, like. And even that happens in every business. I think it's just amazing that 20-30 years ago we wouldn't have had that.
No, and I think it's a really core skill that, I don't know if it's being taught at school, but it seems like it's perhaps not, that's a really core skill, how to be self-directed, how to self-teach, how to go out and to know really quickly where to go to find the right information. Because you're right, that is a crucial skill, especially if you're somebody that wants to set up your own business. Because like you said, in those early days and those early years, I know I've had the same thing with my business. You are everything. You are marketing, you are finance, and you don't know how to do these things. You just have to learn. So important. Okay, so you came out of your master's then with this fantastic wealth of experience behind you. Talk me through what your next steps were. Where did you go, and what did you go straight into Crisp at that point?
So I started working at Crisp Thinking, this company that helps quite big brands with their social media, online presence, brand reputation. So they kind of have this service of monitoring user-generated content, so comments and likes and everything else, and they can tell the business that they're working with, the type of things that people are saying, and help them improve their reputation by addressing those things. And they also do some really, really interesting stuff around like bad actors online, so they kind of pick out bad actors, and a lot of it's about sort of security and picking out threats and stuff on social media. It was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. I worked in the sales team in London for a year and a half, and then near the end of it, I wanted to move into a consultant role rather than in sales. I was much more interested in actually getting into the nitty gritty of those types of things, and I moved into that. And then I was just that kind of wanting to do my own thing was just bubbling up inside me, and I was like, I'm not sure if I really want to be here anymore. It was a lot. They're headquartered in Leeds, so there was a lot of travel going up to Leeds to do the job. And I just one day I decided, you know what, enough's enough. I'm gonna call it quits here and find something else to do. That was the initial thing. I didn't quit my job to start C3. I actually just quit my job to do something else. And like one of the things actually that I think I'm really grateful about Crisp was that although it was that first year and a half was a sales role, sales is so important and so crucial to any business. I think we have a slightly negative opinion on salespeople in general because we get called by them all the time and emailed by them all the time. But without sales, you don't really have a business, which was really helpful for us because it meant that right at the beginning, from day one, I could do some sales emails and meetings and try and build up our client base like that. So it's, just wanted to say, like, I think we're unfair on salespeople. I think we need to be more understanding of how important it is to running a business is to have a sales team and have people actually, speaking to people and potentially getting these clients. So that was sales. That was Crisp. Moved into consultancy. Decided that it wasn't for me. And then I was actually working in a wine bar for a bit. So a lovely little wine bar near Peckham. Do you know Peckham Cellars? It's sort of between near Queens Road, Peckham, so South London. Lovely place. I'd recommend everyone go. Yeah, really, really nice. They do fantastic wine and really nice nibbles and stuff. I was working there just as sort of in between jobs, and that's when my business partner Adam came to me with this idea of calculating carbon footprints. Um,
And how did you know Adam? Did you know him already socially, or?
Yeah, so we actually worked out one night after a few beers that we're actually each other's oldest friends who still see each other. So I've known him since we were about 8 or something. We're sort of, yeah, really sort of childhood friends. And he was doing a PhD in data science at the time. Very brainy, very clever guy. He's definitely the sort of intelligent one. I'm more of the sort of front side kind of thing. He's the sort of, yeah, the clever one. And he came to me with this idea of individual carbon footprint calculations and offsets. That was where we first started. So we built this first website I was talking about with a calculator. Well, also at the same time, COVID hit. So this is when COVID first hit. I was working in wine bar. COVID hit, was put on furlough, which meant that I could spend all my time building stuff and working on C3, which was actually a bit of a blessing in disguise. Obviously, it was terrible for lots of people, so I always feel bad about that. But in terms of timing for us, it meant that I could work really heavily on C3 whilst sort of, you know, still being paid from that job. Obviously, we weren't making any money then. It was very much a bit of a passion project at the time. So the initial idea was to launch this carbon footprint calculation service for individuals. So you could calculate your carbon footprint and offset for between £5 and £10, depending on your carbon footprint. There are lots of other services like this. I'm not sure if you've heard of things like Ecology and other companies where you can kind of sign up. But when we did that was Ecology were the only ones, and they didn't have a calculator. So we thought, right, this is going to be, we've got an actual calculator that you can, you know, measure your footprint and then offset your exact amount of emissions. Anyway, we got about 50 sign-ups in that after that first launch, and they were mainly friends and family. And we were like, this isn't quite what we were expecting. We're not marketeers. We don't know how to do the B2C stuff. We didn't have the sort of, you know, rocket speed growth we were hoping for. As first-time founders, I'm sure it's the kind of the situation of most people. So we pivoted hard towards businesses because I had the experience speaking to businesses before. And that's when we began to build our calculation suite and software to help us do these calculations. And that's really when it started to get more interesting, and we were tackling different problems every day. It wasn't sort of it wasn't just a single thing. It was suddenly we were working with businesses again, and we were finding all these new ways of calculating and building all these tools and making the process easier and easier. And that's where we've got to. I feel like I've gone on a bit there. I've kind of rambled a little bit, but yeah.
No, that's all really good stuff. So interestingly then that you kind of went to market with this B2C idea, and then very quickly kind of pivoted away. I think you're right. I mean, it's a currently now a busier market, isn't it, the B2C, but also there's that it takes quite a lot of voluntary discretion from individuals to download it and then stick to it. And having some strong marketing background in kind of behavioral science and nudge theory and things like that to get people using it is really important, which sounds you didn't have. So the B2B consultancy pivot sounds like it makes a lot more sense with your kind of background and the experience that you'd had. And did you find that from a sort of funding and bootstrapping perspective, if you're happy to share that with us, I mean, how did you fund the business in those kind of first months and years?
Yeah, absolutely, more than happy to share. I think that's probably one of our kind of sorry, just going to shut that off. I think that's probably one of our like proudest parts about C3 is that we haven't had any funding at all throughout the whole process. We put in a very small amount. I think it was a couple of thousand, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 each, right at the beginning to sort of, you know, get the web hosting and get the but I mean a lot of time, so that, you know, maybe 2 years of our life that we'll never get back. So if you want to include that in terms of investment, then that's going to be a lot more. But in terms of actual cash that we put into the business, it was very much, you know, bootstrap absolutely everything. And I think that's one of the things we're sort of most proud about, is that we've now got to a stage where we're kind of supporting three people full time without having had any investment whatsoever, or put much cash in the business at all.
Was that a very conscious decision right from the beginning, or it just sort of organically went that way as it started to pay for itself and you didn't?
Yeah, I'd say
it?
definitely the second half. It was very organic in that respect. In terms of a decision, I think me and Adam are very different. So both of us have different opinions on this, and I think, yeah, I quite like the idea of building something completely ourselves from scratch and getting it to a stage where we are, self-sufficient and continuing that slow, steady, sustainable growth that doesn't suddenly go like huge and then drop off the face of the planet, but equally doesn't grow very like hugely quickly. We're just steadily increasing and sort of doing it as we can, rather than going all in. Whereas I think Adam probably has a slightly different opinion on that, where investment means we would be able to grow quicker and we'd be able to have more impact and we'd be able to do more things. And I can completely see that. It's one of those conversations that we've had a lot. So it wasn't sort of a conscious decision one way or the other. It was very much, it's always been a conversation. And I don't think we'll never go for investment. I think hopefully we'll get to a point where we've proved the process so much so, and I think we're almost at that point where we can really prove that we can do the work for the amount that we charge, and we've got a good number of clients, and it's all kind of working to a really I'm really happy with how it's going at the moment. So once that's the case, then getting investment to scale makes more sense, rather than just sort of getting investment, spending a lot on hiring loads of people, and then not necessarily having the number of clients you need, or starting to fall off.
I think part of that kind of depends on the business model a bit as well, doesn't it? And I know right at the very front of the very beginning of this conversation, before we went live, you and I were sort of talking about how I would introduce C3, and you were very specific to say it's not a platform per se, it's not a SaaS platform, it's more of a tech-enabled consultancy. Exactly. And so I feel like that's the difference in the funding bit, right? Because consultancies in and of themselves have slightly lower overheads to run and are slightly more profitable, I suppose. And then when you're building a SaaS platform and trying to scale a SaaS platform, that's more where you kind of need funding to get that growth. So I suppose, yeah, if you were to ever transition across to that would probably be a sensible time. But just for sake of definition and for the people watching, talk us through what the actual offering from C3 is, who your kind of customers are, and that distinction between it not being a SaaS platform, but it being a kind of tech-enabled consultancy.
Absolutely. So I think that you picked up on an absolute crucial element to why we've done what we've done, and we've gone this direction of a tech-enabled consultancy rather than a SaaS platform, because we've seen. So originally the idea was to build. Once we'd pivoted toward business, it was about building a SaaS platform, a platform for businesses to self-serve carbon footprint calculations. That was the idea, and we made designs. We started down the process. We very nearly sort of got a platform built, and I'm so glad we didn't, because there are hundreds of these platforms popping up everywhere. And we went to an event a few months ago now, I think about 6 months ago, and about 20 of there was probably only 100 or so different exhibitors, and about 20 of them were carbon footprint calculation platforms, SaaS platforms, and then they were kind of coming to us saying, we need consultants to use our platforms because we can't get clients that want to use our platforms. It's too complicated to use them. So the idea for someone working in the space is fantastic. We've always said, like, we've always wanted to build this platform, blah, blah. And as soon as you realize that actually businesses aren't quite ready for it yet. Some businesses are. So businesses that have to report their emissions might well have a team of people working on it. They can use those platforms. Brilliant. It's a bit like accounting software, like QuickBooks. You still have an accountant. You don't just have the accounting software that business owners use. I mean, maybe in very small businesses, business owners might use that. But in general, you need the accountant to do it. So for us, our switch was then, right, how can we make these calculations as smooth and easy as possible for us to do, so that we can scale internally, and we can hire people that don't need to be as experienced, or as they don't need to necessarily be carbon footprint consultants, we can build our own internal tools to make this really, really easy for us to do, but we still have a human there to help explain things to those clients. So what we've built, what we've got internally is very, very scalable. We don't necessarily need to hire specialists to use it. We've got all this sort of software and tools that we can use, and some of it's very, very, very clever in terms of how we. But I'll explain that in a bit. So that's why we went down this route, is because it needs a slightly hybrid model. It needs some kind of hand-holding. This type of stuff is complicated. So just asking a client, a customer or a business to use a platform doesn't always work. And some of these other software platforms we were speaking to, they were like, yeah, I was like, so, just asking general questions of how many employees do you have? Oh, 20, 30, they've had some investment. And how many clients do you have? Well, at the moment we've got 10. I was like, oh wow, okay, so you've got more employees than you do clients. How does that fine if you've got investment, but then how's that going to work long term? I've never understood how these types of things work when you've got such a huge amount of employees and investment, but you don't necessarily have the proof of concept that people want it. So then we switched towards this consultancy model and started building these tools. And what we do now is full carbon footprint calculations of all scopes of emissions, so scope 1, 2, and 3. And we make it as easy as possible for businesses to do it. So rather than asking them to enter in all the data line by line into a spreadsheet, which is what most consultants will ask to do, or using inaccurate methodologies to calculate emissions, which is what most platforms do, or a bit of both, where a platform might ask for it in a certain format, which means you have to kind of go through. We'll just take raw data from clients, so whether that's transaction data from Zero or couriers and courier CSVs and all sorts of other data, and we'll then build tools that will automatically process through those sets of data. Now, we've got tools now for things like Royal Mail, DPD, all those types of things. So as soon as someone gives us one of those, we can just straight through and process emissions based on that. But it means that the client's not there kind of entering things in all the time or working through stuff. They can just give us everything they've got, and we can say, right, these are the areas we need to focus on. These are the areas where we need more specific data. And that kind of really makes it a lot easier for customers to use.
Yeah. And in terms of types of customer and who your kind of key demographic is, you say small businesses, but how small? And who are your kind of key demographic?
Yeah. So we can, all businesses need to measure their carbon footprint ultimately. Usually in terms of our kind of target demographics, it's normally slightly bigger than sort of 1 to 5. 1 to 5 usually doesn't have the budget to use a service like ours. So anything above that, right up to, I think our biggest client has about 450, 500 employees. Okay. We actually see our processes and our tools and our algorithms being more useful and adding more value to the bigger clients, because they've got thousands and thousands of transactions, and we can really granularly categorize all those transactions and then pull out activity data from within the description field to understand what those transactions are all about. So it's almost more valuable to a bigger client, but we obviously started with smaller clients because we kind of bootstrapped everything and started with with very small clients. So we can kind of cover anyone of any size, but the ones that we found the most use, our real kind of sweet spot, are like tech-based companies or agencies that have that might be working with people that are asking for their carbon emissions. So lots of companies are now saying, right, we'll only work with you if you report your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. The government's now saying it. If you want to work with the government on a contract of over a certain amount, they're saying, right, we need your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Those types of businesses for us are our real sweet spot, because we're set up now to do it. We can just kind of process through those really, really easily. We have got a couple of construction companies which are a lot more sort of in detail and more. There's a lot more to it. We've got a couple of small little coffee roasters and all sorts of different things. But everyone needs to understand. Everyone needs to do it at some point. It's just about when they're going to do it. So.
And I bet that's super interesting from a consultancy perspective. And just as somebody like yourself that's interested in businesses and how they operate and how they run, I bet that's really interesting, speaking to all these different companies and really getting under the skin of, like you said, if you're covering their scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions, you'll be getting a really holistic view of their entire business operations. And I bet that's really, really interesting.
It's amazing actually, because it's one of those things that I didn't realize was going to happen. And then when you start to sort of work on these and you kind of, like, we've done a couple of life cycle assessments as well. So there's also a difference between between a business calculation and a product calculation. So if you're measuring the emissions from a product, there's a different process involved because you need to cover the whole life cycle of that product. Whereas if you're measuring a business, when you're looking at the footprint of their products, you might not go all the way back to the beginning of that product. You might just take an average emission for part of the product rather than, it's a bit complicated. But the point I'm trying to make is that when you look at life cycle assessments of products, that's when they get really interesting about all the different processes involved, all the different logistics and transport and everything. And it's suddenly like, I don't think there are many other sort of jobs where you get so much interesting stuff about other businesses and how it works. It's kind of amazing. It's just like, yeah, it's crazy how the sort of specifics to which also the niches of businesses. It's amazing when you find a business where you're like, I didn't even realize there was such a thing existed, that someone did those types of things. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's those kind of nuts and bolts. I think, you know, we see a product on the shelf and you almost take for granted how it got there. But your day-to-day is understanding the exact nuts and bolts of how that thing got put together and gets onto that shelf. And I bet that's really interesting. Cool, perfect. So where are you at today then? So you mentioned the business is now sustaining the salaries of 3 people. So you've grown. Talk me through what that journey was like, from it going from just being you and Adam to we need more people. When did you realize that, and how did you go about going and finding them, and who did you hire first?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually, so yeah, it was just me and Adam to start with, up until probably we had about, so we also had, as part of our service for some smaller clients, we have this like tree planting plugin where you can plant a tree for every item or product. So a lot of our initial clients were that kind of size of client, very small, but planting based on, you know, number of products they sell on an e-commerce platform, something like that. So it was me and Adam up until about 35, 40-ish clients, and maybe 20 of them were tree planters, and 10 or so were full calculation clients. We then had something called the Kickstart scheme. Have you heard of the Kickstart scheme?
I have, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, work in recruitment, I'm sure, absolutely. Yeah. I was going to say that was a silly question, wasn't it? But yeah, so we used the Kickstart scheme initially to hire 3 employees.
Brilliant.
Which was fantastic, because we had someone working in social media and marketing, someone working in like data, so the data, like a data analyst, and then someone sort of working on the sales side of things. Now the Kickstart schemes, I think it's fair to say, can be a little bit hit and miss. So one of those individuals really wasn't what we were kind of looking for, but we went through the process and we just treated it as a kind of a training for them rather than getting anything necessarily back from it. But that was fine. It was still a good experience to go through that. But we quite quickly, at the end of the 6 months, that was kind of, we couldn't take that person on. But the other 2 were absolutely brilliant, really, really motivated, really, really passionate. You know, we really enjoyed, having both of them. So we hired both of them at the end of that 6-month period. So we were a team of 4. And since then, so when we had, obviously during the sort of economic situation that we had over the last sort of 6 months or so, we realized actually social media wise, we don't necessarily need someone who's working on social media full time. It was quite a large salary to be paying someone. Along with a couple of other things, they also wanted to move on to something else as well. It was kind of a mutual decision. We were just like, right, this is probably time to call it a day. We only hired them because of the Kickstart scheme. So that was another good bit of experience. But then we kept Erin, who's absolutely wonderful. She's sort of brilliant and really, really good at what she does. And she builds now a lot of the tools and a lot of the processes. And she's the data one. So that's how we went from just Adam and I to 3 to 5, and then to 4, and then now to 3. We also, there's also that there are difficult times in these something. It's not all kind of good. We did have a bit of a I guess we've had our wobbles over the last year or so with economic situations where people haven't been paying us, and all these types of situations, and you don't realize that suddenly when you've got someone else that you're paying, and if a company doesn't pay you for a piece of work, or a few companies don't pay you for a piece of work, how do you then pay the person who's working for you? It's really important that is it's really important that you recognize that, and that suddenly that's your responsibility to pay people. So yeah, we've definitely had a couple of wobbles like that. Now we're absolutely fine. It's all picking back up again. But yeah, it was that was an interesting bit of period of time.
And was that sort of very recently, just sort of leading up to the summer, that kind of time? Because there was a real wobble in the market around then. I know we felt it, a lot of our clients did.
Yeah, exactly. Then that was exactly when all that happened. It was like a month of not having any new clients sign up, and a month of not being paid by some clients, and that has its effects, especially when we don't have, like I said, we haven't had investment, so we always make sure we've got enough in the bank to pay 3 or 4 months worth of salaries. But that suddenly goes quite quickly when you're not getting paid. So it was, but it was a learning process, and it was really good to. I think it's good to share these things, because it's it's not all plain sailing all the time.
Completely agree, and there'll be lots of other people that will go through the same thing as they go through their startup journeys, and it's good for them to know that they're not the first person to go through this, and they absolutely will not be the last. Yeah, perfect. And on that marketing point, you mentioned about having somebody that was dedicated on social media, and then deciding, I'm not sure necessarily that we need that person. Obviously, you've got a background in social media slightly yourself, and a background in sales. So what have you decided in terms of sort of marketing and customer acquisition strategy is the right approach for you then?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's another one of those where, so initially it was all just me doing all the outreach, finding new clients. I think also, so we're now at about 60 clients. I don't think I said about where we're at entirely in terms of business. So yeah, we're now at about 60 clients, which suddenly means the account management side of things, it takes up a lot of time. You've got a lot of people to be speaking to, a lot of back and forth. But yeah, initially it was all about outreach and emailing people and calling people. Then we started getting some sort of inbound leads, people getting in contact with us. Now a lot of our business comes through referrals. So we have businesses that are referring us to other businesses, and also repeat work. So companies coming back for second years, third years calculations, because I mean, for us, that's quite reassuring that we're doing something right with companies coming back again and again. But in terms of we did go down the route of doing some Google ads. I'm not sure if you've ever looked into Google ads before.
We haven't gone down that road, no.
Yeah, so we started going down that sort of way, and it was, you have to invest quite a lot to do that per month, and it was just starting to pick up. So we were sort of, it wasn't really doing anything for 3 or 4 months, and we're like, we're just wasting so much money on these. And then it just started to pick up, and that's when the economic situation was at its worst, and we had to pull the plug on them, which was a real shame. But obviously we had to do it. It wasn't a case of wanting to. So now we are back to doing some outreach. We've done a couple of events, which is also another great way of getting the name out there, getting some more leads, speaking to new people. Actually, you can see in our background, that's actually one of the part of our event stand that we had, which is all kind of reusable and sustainable, that kind of stuff. It's just a hard grind. You just have to work at it. And
really... you do quite a lot yourself, don't you? I mean, you and I have been connected on LinkedIn for a long time now, but you're very kind of vocal, I suppose, as a founder on LinkedIn in terms of building your brand and building your network. How useful do you think that's been to customer acquisition and bringing new clients in?
Yeah, really, really good. Like LinkedIn, we kind of switched. We were doing a lot of stuff on Instagram originally, and we now just LinkedIn everything. post regularly, comment on other people's stuff. If you see something that's not right, comment on it and say, especially if you understand it better than the person that's commented on it. The amount of times I've seen experts in the field say something that I know is not necessarily correct, if I just comment on it, not in a nasty way or a derogatory way, but just to say it's important to understand that this is that, blah, blah, so explain what's going on. People can then see that you understand the area and actually get in contact with you to ask you other questions. I think I've also always have a very much a sort of happy to talk to anyone. So anyone that wants to know about this, we will share all of our materials. We've just published our methodology, our carbon footprint calculation methodology. We want other people to do this. Like, this isn't just, we're not going to hide our kind of ways of doing things so that people, we want to share it, because we want, everyone's going to need to do this at some point. So I think that's one of the things on social media for me, is just being as open and transparent as possible and saying what I think and making sure that giving away as much as possible, so that people can then go, right, that these guys know what they're talking about, and they'll come and speak to us. That's what's been a really good thing for us. And we've definitely seen leads come in through it, but usually it's people recommending us to other people. So we'll often get sort of referrals, and also lots of communities as well, online communities where people again connect us to people that are looking for carbon footprint calculations.
That's brilliant. Referrals is just the strongest way of winning new business, isn't it? There is no stronger way. So it's great that you've obviously been doing a good enough job to win you those referrals to then, keep growing the business. That's great. So what do the next 12 months have in store for you? Have you got big plans for 2023?
Yeah, we do have some. Well, we've always got big plans that don't necessarily happen.
Got a dream though.
Yeah, exactly. So we always have our sort of blue sky plans, which are really, what we'd want to do. So we do want to find something that is really, really scalable, and build something that is really, really scalable. So that might be sort of categorization and sort of tools to pull out information for consultancies and software platforms that are doing carbon footprint calculations, because that part of what we do is so useful for the user, to make it easier for the user, being able to package that up and use it for sort of these software platforms, or they can then use our kind of categorization technology. That's one kind of area that we really want to focus on. In terms of like our own business and side of things, we've just launched our version 2 suite, which allows us to drastically reduce the amount of time we're using to do calculations. So we can really take on a lot more clients now. Just the three of us, we can churn through lots more calculations because of what we've built. It's been a long time in the making, but we've just done our first 3 calculations with it, and it's all working really well. So that will be the focus for the next 6 months, I guess, is to hone that, make it better, and build our client base. And then, like I said, we always have these ideas for grand plans of being the engine of carbon footprint calculation tools, or the other one was I can't remember what we were going to call it, but some kind of a network which by you could understand emissions of any business based on them reporting some mandatory things, and it was some fun things like that. But yeah, there's lots of ideas in the pipeline.
Cool. So that sounds like a really clear goal then, to just scale in 2 different directions. So continue doing what you're doing, using your version 2 internally, enabling you to scale that up. So being able to take on more customers, delivering the existing service, but then also start to build something else out, a sort of scalable SaaS platform piece. Yeah. But what I like about that is the fact that you'll be building that from the knowledge of your consulting work, and you'll be building something that's what the customers actually want and will use. It's led by the user, rather than in some cases where people will go to market with a platform that they've built to solve a problem that they think exists. Yeah. But it's not really what the users want. I feel like that background in consulting enables you to really hone that offering.
Yeah, and like we've done that. We did what you just said with our individual carbon footprint calculation and offsetting tool. We built something that we thought would be really, really cool, and only our friends and family really signed up. So it's exactly that. It's that, building something without understanding what's actually needed can be a massive waste of time and money. Whereas having experience with clients of different sizes in different industries, there is no one size fits all software platform that's going to work for everyone. There needs to be specific, industry based tools and stuff to make it work. So, and we wouldn't have known that before, before kind of doing these calculations and processing through it. So,
yeah, absolutely. That earned experience is absolutely vital, isn't it? Perfect. Thank you so much for showing that. So it sounds like an exciting year ahead then. So yeah, watch this space. And if there is anybody out there watching that is a small business that wants to know how to track or reduce their carbon footprint, then do get in touch with Eddie. So I've got some quick fire questions. Always round out with 3 quick fire questions. So the first one is, what would be your top piece of advice for somebody that was thinking about setting up their own business?
Do it now. Do it now, and don't wait for too long. I got some really good advice from someone. I feel like quick fire, I probably shouldn't say too much, but
no, go for it.
Someone that if you're planning to do it in 5 years or 10 years, the reality is you'll get 5 years or 10 years into your career, and you won't be able to take a salary sacrifice or a cut of that much to start a business. It's a really, it's a year of living on beans on toast, basically, to make sure that you can do this. You're not going to have money instantly. So just do it now, early, as soon as you can. Don't listen to people that tell you can't do it, because you can, especially with all the tools and things that are out there. It's possible. It's going to be hard work, but if you're thinking about doing it, just do it.
Love that. Yeah, and you're so right. Just do it as soon as you can, because if it doesn't go perfectly, like you said, all the things you learn, you can pivot, and all the things that you learn from it not going well will help it go better next time. So yeah,
and it gives you really good experience as well for getting back into the workplace. So I think now, going back into the workplace, if I did want to pull the plug on C3, which we're nowhere near doing, but at any point, if we did want to, I'd have so much more experience to be able to offer to a business than I did 2 years ago. And I think that businesses understand that. I really do. Yeah.
If anything, it's just a massive show of tenacity as well, isn't it? Which businesses love. Okay, great. And second question, which business or sustainability role model do you wish you could just have 1 hour with?
Okay, I've got one for each. Sustainability role model would be Mike Berners-Lee. He is the kind of expert on carbon footprint calculations. He wrote a book, which I've got up on my shelf, How Bad a Banana Is. Everyone should get it and read it. It's brilliant. Business role model would have to be my grandfather. He was a very influential sort of businessman back in the day, and I'd just love to have an hour to chat through C3 with him and get some advice. He always gave the best advice. A couple of little snippets would be smile costs nothing, so always smile and make people feel important, because it's a good thing to do. So that would be my business role model. I wish I could have another hour with him.
Oh, that's great. I love that. That's really nice. Perfect. And the final one being, what is one quick lifestyle change that you would recommend to listeners to help them live more sustainably?
Think about every purchase you make in terms of its impact on the planet. So that could be Black Friday deals. Do you really need it? That could be, clothes or anything else. Do you really need those things? Think about that purchase. Equally, it could be food. Do you need that meat that day, every single day? I used to eat a lot of meat growing up. I now eat vegan probably 5 days out of the 7, and then if I'm going out for dinner, I'll treat myself, and that's also fine. But just think about, you don't necessarily have to act on it, but just think about the purchase you're making, and sort of just to make sure that you're justifying that is the right thing to do with everything you're doing and everything you're buying.
Yeah, and you're right. It's getting in that mindset, isn't it? And changing collectively the global mindset around consumption is really important. I was listening to Martin Lewis, money saving expert, his podcast where I was out for a walk the other day, and he has a 3-step checklist before anyone goes and buys something. And he says you should think, can I afford it? Will I use it? Is it worth it? And can I get it cheaper elsewhere? I think there needs to be that same 3-step for sustainability, right? Do I need it? Yeah. Will I use it? Yeah. Can I find a greener alternative elsewhere?
I was actually going to say exactly that. Look for alternatives as well.
Yeah.
So that it's not just buy it or don't buy it, but look for alternatives. If it's meat, look for alternatives for meat. If it's travel, just have a look and see if there is a train that's cheaper. If it's not cheaper, try and justify actually paying a little bit more and getting the train. Obviously, you want to be doing that as much as you can, but just look for alternatives. Sometimes you might be surprised and actually be like, "Wow, that's great. I'll just go with that. That's a lot easier and cheaper." So yeah, I think you're right. Those three for alternate. That's a really good little strategy for if you're going to buy anything or make any purchase.
Definitely. And yes, that mindset, that last bit, isn't it? That like, oh, I'd really like that new top. Could I actually find the exact same top on Vinted or on eBay? Or, it's just taking that extra step. Yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really great to go through that journey with you, hear about, what you've been doing over the last 3-4 years, and hear about your plans for the next year. I hope everything goes brilliantly for you.
Thank you.
And yeah, have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, well, it's great. Thank you so much.
No worries. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.